So in the last session, which was offline, we talked about tags like HTML tags and elements and attributes and formatting tags, comments, images and lists, and tables also. So today we're going to start with HTML forms. So all of you create folder. You guys can just create a folder wherever you want, in whichever folder. Open that folder. And type CMD over here. Press enter and terminal will be opened. So type code space dot dot. Create a folder. And then go to this bar and type CMD. So it will take you to your terminal. And then type code space dot dot. So it will open VS Code. In that folder. So I have already created a folder, so I'm going to be opening that. And create two files, index.html. This you can create later. Click here and create a file. Is everyone following? Can you just raise your hands?
Let me just enable the mics. So if they have any doubts, they can ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys should be able to use your mics. If you have any doubts, you can ask it off now. Good. No doubts. Can we proceed? Yeah, I think we can move on, Nishal.
Okay. So, okay, let's start with the forms. So an HTML form is used to collect user input, and the inputs will be sent to a server for processing. So let's start with it. So here you can just type doc. All of you just type doc in your file.
One sec.
And press enter. So you will get this structure of the HTML. Type doc and then press enter. So it will show you the structure. So next thing is how we start the forms. We have to type the form element first. So this element defines that whatever we are typing is a form now. So in forms, we have different type of input fields like text, radio buttons, checkbox, submit buttons. So we have different codes for that as well. So when we have to give names or any other type of text like addresses and all, we have to give input type as text. And then we have radio buttons. It is for selecting only one of all the choices. And checkbox, we can select as many as we want. And then we have submit button. So I'll show you how to use these. Input type. So input is the element, and then we have type, which is the attribute. So if we give text here, you guys will be having go live over here. So if you click on that, you can see the outputs. So this is your text field. And then we have input type, password. So whatever you type here, it will be hidden. So BR is line break. And then we have input type as date. So you can see over here, you can click on this and select any date. And then we have email. This is for typing email addresses. And then we have input type number. Here you can type only numbers. If you type any characters or letters, it won't be visible. You have to type only numbers, and you can see these arrows over here. It will decrease or increase the numbers. Please make note of these things. Like type, you have to give text, password, date, email, number. So then we have radio buttons. So we'll give input type as radio. You can see here. So this is how we make radio buttons. I can just give you option 1. So we use input type only when we have to send one input from among these two fields. We have to select only one over here. So that time we will choose the radio buttons, and when we have to send multiple inputs, we can use checkbox. So this is our checkbox. This way you can create as many checkboxes or radio buttons you want. And when you click on the radio buttons, you can't undo it. You can't deselect it, but checkbox you can. And in the last, we have the submit button. So input type will be submit. You can see here. You guys have any doubts?
Guys, the mics are enabled. If you have any doubts, you can ask.
Are you guys following? How many of you have done till here? Can you just raise your hands? What about the rest of you? Are you guys still doing? And then let's move further. You all can lower your hands. So let's create a proper form with all the labels. So this will be a demo form. We'll use all this, and we have to give labels also, like what is this field used for, like last name, first name, date of birth. So this tag is for horizontal lines. HR. So let's create a new form. We can give the title as demo form. And then we have our label element. Label for is the attribute. You can see here. The label defines the label for the element we are using. And we have an attribute called for. So for and ID of the input has to be same to bind them together. So I'll just show you with the example. So let's say we are creating this field for, can you guys not type in this? Please don't type anything over here. So label for a name, which is first name. And here you can give the label first name. And after this, you have to give the input type as text. And then we will specify the ID, which has to be the same thing that you have given here. Like this for attribute and ID attribute are used to bind the label and the input field together. You can see here, you can type the name here. And then label for last name. This is how you specify the labels. And then input type for the input field. And ID will be L name, last name. So we can give line break over here. So this will break the line. Yeah. And then label for DOB. And the type here will be date. And ID DOB. Make sure the for attribute and ID attribute have the same value. And now we can create a field for email. So the type will be email. And then let's say you have to give password. So label for password. Input type will be password. And then specify the ID. And for numbers, the input type we use as number. And then let's make radio buttons. So for the radio buttons, first we'll give the input type and then label. And for this radio type, we'll be using the attributes name and value. So you can see here. So why we give the label after input is to define this thing. We are not giving the labels for gender. We are giving labels here for the options. So the ID is to bind it with the for attribute. And we have name here. I will tell you why this is used. And value is what value it will be taking. It will send this value to the server. So when you are clicking on this, so it will send the value as female to the server. And make sure you give the same name as this. You can see here we can click only one of these. We can't select both. So this is why we have to use the same name. So whenever we are doing radio buttons, we have to give the name same for how many ever values we are giving. So in this way, we can select only one for this name. So what happens is in checkbox is we can select multiple values. So there we will be using different names. So then we move to checkbox. So here the input type will be checkbox. So we are using the attributes ID, name, and value for checkbox. Guys, please don't access this. So here we have to give the ID as language 1, which we have given here. So you can see the output. The attributes used are ID, name, and value. So for checkbox, you have to give different names. Only in radio buttons we'll be using the same name because only one value has to be sent. So here we have to give different names because many options, many values can be sent to them. We can choose multiple options. So this is how you create checkbox. You can select multiple options over here. And lastly, we'll create a submit button. So input type will be submit. So this is our demo form. You guys can make note of this. Any doubts still here?
Your mic's enabled, guide. If you have any questions, you can ask. I think you can go ahead, Nishal.
Okay. So this is how you create a form in HTML. So our HTML session is done, and now I'll be starting with CSS. If you have any doubts in HTML, you can ask right now? If not, then I'll start with CSS. Okay, so nobody has any doubts? Then we'll start with CSS. So in CSS, we'll be talking about the selectors and inclusion. It means different types of CSS that we use, colors and fonts, and background images, background colors, and then how to add images and how to position them, and how to give different colors for the links, and then borders. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It handles the look and feel of a web page, and it is used with HTML. So it is a way to style the HTML documents, and it describes how the elements should be displayed. First, we'll see the inclusion. So we have three ways: inline, internal, or embedded CSS, and then external. Inline CSS is when you use the style inside the tags. So I'll show you how it works. So we have demo form over here. So inline is when you use the style attribute. As you can see over here, you use the style attribute inside a tag in the HTML document. So this type of CSS is called as inline CSS. It is used in line with the tags. The attribute used is style, and then we have the property, and this is the value. So the CSS format is selector, and then the style attribute, and property and value. And then we have internal CSS. So internal CSS is defined within the style element. So what we can do is inside the head element, we can just define the style tag. We'll use the style element. And then we can write the CSS code for this. So if you use the style element inside the head tag of an HTML document, you'll call it as internal CSS or embedded CSS. We won't be using these formats, as we'll use most of the times we'll be using external CSS. because it has many advantages over internal CSS. As you can see here, we can use the same style sheet file for the different HTML files. We can reuse the same code. So that's why we prefer external CSS most of the times. I'll show you how external CSS is used. So we have to create a new file called stylesheet.css or any name.css. You have to use the extension .css. So all of you can create a file called style.css. So this is how you create an external CSS file. And to link it to the HTML document, we'll be using link element. And here we'll specify the path of that style sheet. You have to give the name here. Now this style sheet is linked with HTML sheet, HTML document. And then we'll talk about selectors. So patterns used to select and style HTML elements. Let's say we have a paragraph tag over here. Or heading tag. So this P tag or H1, this will be called as a selector, because while defining in the CSS file, we have to use the selectors to specify to which element we are adding the styles, to which element we need to choose the background, to which element we need to change the font. We'll be defining it using the selectors. So the selectors are of these types: element, class, ID, attribute, universal. So element is when you use P tag. So to specify the background color for P tag, we can just type P. So this is how it works. So the selector we used here is an element selector, that is the paragraph tag. And then we have class. So we can specify classes. For example, if we are using div element, or let's say for this h1 element, if I give class, so in the style sheet, while defining the class, you have to use dot class name. So whenever you're using class name in this style sheet, you have to use dot. So the selector we used here is a class. And for this, the selector used is element. Then we have ID. ID works the same way as class. Say if you have ID over here, instead of class, instead of dot in the style sheet, we have to use hash symbol. So this works the same way as class, but the only thing we have to change is for ID, we have to give hash instead of dot.
Nishad, I think someone has got a doubt. This looks like a good point to stop and ask for doubts.
Yeah. Yes, Abhilash, you can ask the doubt.
Guys, if anyone has doubts, you can clear it out right now with regarding CSS, anything at all.
I think we can go. Let's go.
Okay. And then we have attributes. So we can specify the styles for attributes as well. So when we are using ID, class, so these are nothing but attributes. And then universal. For universal, we'll be using this * symbol. So what this does is it will specify whatever style we're typing over here to the entire document, not just any specific element, but to the entire document. We call this as universal selector. So let's move to colors and fonts. So CSS colors, we can specify the colors in various ways. We can use named colors. What I have used over here are named colors. We can specify the name. And then we have RGB hexadecimal colors. We will be using codes for that. We'll get color codes. So we have to specify the color code over here. And then we have RGB colors. So as you can see, this is hexadecimal code. And RGB, we can set it using RGB as well. There are 3 ways to define the colors. So most of the colors or gradients, you can specify them using color codes or RGB. And then we have CSS fonts. So you can set font weight. For the heading tag, it won't work. Sorry. And then we can set font family. So these are the properties and these are the values. And you can also specify the size of the font using the font size. You can see the font size has changed. And then we have backgrounds. So we can use this to set the background of an element. It allows applying single or multiple background images, and we can set colors as well. So these are the properties: background color, background image, background position, and background repeat. Let's say we're adding sorry for the disturbance. So to add background image, you can use the property called background image, and here you will type URL. So you can just download any images and you can give the URL over here. So I'm using the image that I already had. So you can just create a new folder to keep all your images that you have to add in the website. You can name it as images. So this is the easiest method so that it will be organized in the same place. So whichever folder you have saved your documents, you can create a new folder called images or assets, and then you can store all the images inside that folder. So here you can give the path. Just a second. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. There was an issue with the code. So let's start. So next we'll go with the images, background images. Sorry, how to add images to the HTML document. So we can do that using image tag. And here we have to specify the path. And for this image, you can change the height and width. You can set the height and you can also set width. And then we can set opacity. So these are the properties and you can fix the values to them. And then we can set border radius. And we can also increase its contrast and brightness, and we can blur the images as well using CSS. So this is the example. So here to this image, they have set the height, width, opacity, and border as 10 px. You can see over here, it has rounded borders. So we can set this using border radius. And alt is the attribute we use when the image is not able to load. It will show this text. If the image is unable to load, we'll be getting a text over there. That's why alt attribute is used. So here we have used inline CSS. So inline CSS is used by using the style element. And then we can define the properties and their values. So then we'll move to links. So for links, we will define the links using the anchor tag. And we can set different colors for these anchor tags. If the link is visited, we can give it a different color. Like for example, if the link is unvisited, it will be displayed in red color. And if it's visited link, then we can display it with green color. And when we have a cursor over the link, it will be displayed in hot pink. And if the link is selected, then we can display it using blue color. So this is the code for that. You can make note of this code. You can try. So I hope you made note of these things. So this is the anchor tag, and the selector here is A. So for this selector, so this is how you specify the CSS for anchor tag in the external style sheet. So like this, you have to do for unvisited, visited, and selected link. I'm really sorry, I cannot display the output as there's an issue with the server. Yeah, now it's working. So you can see here. So this is the background image that we have set. And this is our link. And So if we click on this, you can see the color has changed. Yeah. Then we have borders. We can set border around any element like paragraphs or any text or even images, and we can set width or thickness to that border. So the properties for borders are border style, border color, and border width. So we can set it using So here we will type the color and the type of border we are going to use and its thickness. And we can set radius for the border and padding. So as you can see, the color we have specified as a light pink and it is dotted and the size is thick. So padding we have given 10 px. So the padding is nothing but from the text to the margins of the border, how much space should be there. And border radius is 10 px. You can see here we have given the radius, so it has a rounded edge. And then we can specify the border only on the top. For that we use border top. And if we have to specify the border only at the bottom, we can specify it using border bottom. So this is all about CSS. So we have done half of the CSS. The other half will be done by Mihir in the next session. So this is all for today. You guys have any doubts?
Okay, guys, your microphones have been enabled. If there's any doubts, you can ask.